Hey folks, welcome back to Real Estate Investing Unmasked. Today we're going to talk about step 3 of 11 on how to buy a house. So step 3 is saving for down payment and for closing costs. And so the majority of what we're going to talk about today is about closing costs because they are unexpected expenses most of the time. So saving for down payment. So once you have your emergency fund set up, and you have what you think is your down payment, the last thing you have to prepare for are the closing costs. Now, the down payment, that depends on what kind of loan that you get. If you're getting a VA loan, you may be able to get a zero down loan. If you get an FHA loan, it may be a 3.5% down loan. And a conventional loan may be 5%, maybe 10%, maybe 20%. Whatever the down payment is, you got to figure out. It's just raw money. That's all it is, just straight up money. So it depends on what kind of loan you're going to get, what loan you qualify for. And for that, you kind of have to know the FHA guidelines because that's what most people use to buy a home, or the conventional guidelines, which more or less are you can do 5% down, 10% down, 20% down, or anything in between, and even up to 30% and more. So when it's time to get a purchase loan, you need to know what kind of loan you're thinking about getting. If it's FHA, which is the most common one, it's going to be 3.5% down. Now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about closing costs. There are a lot. So I'm going to bring my little friend over here. Why don't you come on over here and tell me, what are the closing costs?
Well, there's property tax, escrow fees, HOA fees, notary fees, application fees, attorney fees, courier fees, credit report fee, mortgage insurance premium if it's an FHA loan, homeowner's insurance, lead paint inspection, property inspection, appraisal fee, lender points, title insurance, origination fee, or a lender fee, prepaid daily interest charges, which is basically free money to the lender, pest inspection, rate lock fee, real estate commissions, recording fee, survey fee, transfer tax, underwriting fees, and of course the VA funding fee if you have a VA loan.
Whew. That's a lot of fees. So as you can see, there are a lot of closing costs. So now let's talk about how you can cut those down. Property taxes. Pretty much doesn't matter where you're from. Your county wants your property taxes. So what they do is when you're buying the property, they come back and back bill you for the property taxes from where you are closing to the time when the taxes are billed again. You see, you prepay for your taxes. At least the person who's living in the house prepays for their taxes. So if I paid for my taxes 6 months in advance and you come in and buy my property and there are 2 months left on that property for those property taxes, then you will pay for those 2 months worth and I will get reimbursed for the 2 months that I had prepaid. That's how it works. Now, property taxes could include a bunch of other things too. For instance, when I bought my most recent house, the trash in the area is covered by taxes. It's collected with the property tax. There's water fees sometimes that are collected with the property tax. There's mello-roos that are sometimes collected with the property tax. Mello-roos are monies where communities have decided together to join their funds together to tax themselves together to pay for a school or park or some other community center of some sort. Those are mello-roos. The most often used mello-roos is to build a school and parks. Escrow fees. Well, escrow fees involve the people who are working in escrow to put everything together to say, yep, this is your property. They got to get paid too. So they may get paid by the hour, they may get paid by the job, but in either case, they're getting paid and it's coming from you or the seller. HOA fees. Now, I hate HOAs. I hate them. But there are a lot of people that love them. And they do good things. There's both positives and negatives. I don't like the fees, but I enjoy the things that come from having an HOA. So it's kind of a you win, you lose some. So the benefits of having an HOA, of course, are most everybody's pretty uniform in the neighborhood. There's an expectation that the community is going to look nice and stay nice. There are also benefits that come, communal benefits. For instance, in the property that I bought with an HOA has a security guard that comes through the neighborhood a couple times a day to make sure everything's okay. We also have grounds that are kept up. We have a community park that doesn't belong to the city but belongs to the HOA, and we take care of that. We also have certain trees around the perimeter of the neighborhood that are taken care of by the HOA. So there are benefits to having an HOA. The downside is you got to pay for it. So if you're in an area that has an HOA, you're going to have to pay HOA fees, and most likely they're going to be taken out during escrow. and they're usually prorated on the month. So if you're closing on the first of the month, you've got to pay for the whole month's worth of HOA fees because you're paying in advance. As you notice, everybody likes their money in advance. So HOA fees you're paying on the first to pay for the full month. If you're closing on the last day of the month, which is why a lot of people close on the last day of the month, is so that they can pay fewer fees. Because when you prorate over a month, then you get to knock out those things. So if your HOA is, say, $200 a month, which is a pretty hefty HOA, and you close on the last day of the month, you're only going to pay like $6.50 instead of 200 for your first month. Then again, come the next month, you already owe the next month's fees. So it's all going to be the same. It's just how much money do you have to bring to closing? Notary fees. So the notary fees, that is something that's interesting. Now, some escrow companies will charge you a notary fee regardless of whether you use their notary or somebody else's notary. What I typically do is I will go to my local bank and I will use my local bank's notary for free, and then say, hey, I don't want to pay your notary charges. And so then they can remove the notary charges, which can be up to $250, because a traveling notary makes a lot of money per signature. In my case, I traveled to the notary this last time because we were in a rush to get this thing closed, and I ended up paying about $250 to have this notary close escrow for me. So it depends on what your needs are time wise. If it doesn't matter what the timing is, you just have to get it done, then go to the notary and pay the fee. It's going to be quite a bit. It could be anywhere between $100 to $250 most likely. But again, you could cut that out if you go to your local bank and get your notary for free 99. Application fees. There may be application fees that your lender charges. If they're there, it could be put into escrow. Attorney's fees. In some states, you actually have attorneys that close escrow instead of an escrow company. I know that I've closed escrow with an attorney a couple times in the state of Ohio. So that is something that is possible to do. And if you're doing it with that, then instead of escrow fees, you're going to have attorney's fees, which could be anywhere between $250 to $1,000, depending on how much time that attorney has to put in to completing your escrow. And of course, it can always be more. Courier fees. Courier fees are fees that you pay to have FedEx or DHL or some similar company take you the documents that you need and take the documents to the person who needs them from you. A lot of times this happens when you get notarized, when you get your documents and you go and notarize your documents, you'll end up having to send them back in overnighted, or as I say, FedExed to the person who's getting them. So those fees are usually covered in escrow. What they'll do is the escrow company will prepay those fees. They'll give you a shipping label that you can put onto your envelope or whatever, and then they will ship it, and the escrow company will pay for that in advance. And when you close escrow, you'll pay for those courier fees. So it could be anywhere between 30 to $100. It depends on how many times you have to go back and forth, but they will charge you for every single one of those. A credit report fee. Well, if you're going to get a loan, you're going to have something attached to your credit. So there's going to be some fee for that. Sometimes you can put that into escrow instead of paying for it in advance. The lender is going to decide on that. A lot of times I pay for mine up front, because when you're getting your pre-approval, they need to know if you qualify for a loan or not. So when you're getting your pre-approval, a lot of times you'll pay the credit fee. It's usually going to be somewhere between 25 and $30. Sometimes they'll just roll it into their fees that they're going to get. Sometimes your mortgage broker says, I'll just eat the fee. So it depends on what arrangement you have. If you have a good arrangement, if you use the same mortgage broker or same mortgage lender every time, they may just swallow that fee. But it depends on them. Mortgage insurance premium. Mortgage insurance premium is, well, it's the premium you pay for getting a loan where you're not going to put 20% down. So for instance, FHA loans, you're going to pay about 1.75%. That's a lot. It's insurance for the bank. So if you don't pay your loan, they're covered, and you get to pay for that insurance. But that's sometimes what you got to do to get the lower down payment, and I completely understand. So if you have a mortgage insurance premium, you're going to pay for it in escrow too. The next one is homeowners insurance. Now, some escrows will allow you to pay for homeowners insurance out of escrow, but you're going to have to pay for the full 12 months. You can't just skimp and do a little bit here and there. A lot of people roll their home insurance into an escrow account. So I know in the last video I said go to, when you're figuring out how much loan you can afford, do 1% for taxes, 1% for insurance. That kind of rounds it out. Well, the reality is your home insurance is probably going to be about $1,200. Could be less, could be more. It's about $100 a month ish. depending on who you go with. So if you're getting home insurance, which every lender is going to require you to have home insurance, you're going to have to pay for that in escrow or pay for it out of escrow. And if you pay for it out of escrow, that's fine, but then you're going to have to certify that you're paying it all the time for your escrow department, for your lender. So you're probably going to pay that in escrow. A lead paint inspection. Now, lead paint inspections, if you're buying a house that's before the 80s, in 1978, I believe, anything older than that, it could have lead paint on the outside. And you probably want to have a lead paint inspection. If you do, that's going to cost you money, and it's going to be an escrow. Anything newer than 1980, you really don't need it. But I'll leave that up to you. That's a personal decision. But if you do it, there's a fee. All right, the next fee is a property inspection, a homeowner's inspection. Now, I do my inspections myself if I'm living locally to the property that I'm buying, but if I'm living far away, I hire somebody else out to do that. A home inspection will cost you nowadays in 2021 somewhere between $450 to $500, and of course that will increase over the years. Previously, I used to spend $250, $300 for a home inspection, but that's been a few years ago. For when I started doing my own inspections, I don't pay anything. The only issue with doing your own home inspection, I found this is the issue that I usually run into, is they want you to be insured and bonded for that inspection because they don't want you falling off the roof or falling through the attic or damaging the property while you're doing your inspection. So what I've done in the past is I've met with the realtor and I let the realtor follow me around. And if they felt like I was doing something unsafe, they could stop me from doing it. And that's how I got around that without having to be insured or bonded. But that's going to be an agreement between you and the realtor. Now, I have experience in building and fixing properties, and so I've seen what's wrong with them. So I'm pretty confident on my ability to catch things when I'm going through a home inspection. If you're not familiar with that because you're buying your house for the first time, pay to have somebody inspect it. They'll tell you what's wrong with everything. Not only that, there are some benefits to having a home inspection. It may save you thousands in the end. The reason is if the home inspector finds something, and they will find something, you can usually go back and renegotiate some of your deal because usually you have a contingency on the home inspection. You can go back to your seller and say, hey, look, my inspector said there's termites. I need you guys to tent the house. Well, that will save you about $3,000. Wall looks like it's starting to have some rot. I need you to credit me $5,000 to cover for this issue that I'm going to deal with on my own when you're gone. So there are ways that you can take care of that. So a home inspection, it's very valuable, but it's going to cost you an escrow. There are some inspectors who will charge you outside of escrow, and there's some that will charge you within escrow. And the reason for that is because the home inspectors don't always get paid. And if they're going to inspect a property and then you say, no, I don't want to buy this property anymore because of the inspection, somebody's got to pay for that inspection. So a lot of times they will roll it into escrow, but sometimes they're going to want you to pay for it outside of escrow. The appraiser fee. Same thing as the last one. With an appraiser fee, a lot of times the appraiser is going to come out for about $450, $500, and that price obviously keeps going up every year. So it's about $450, $500 for somebody to do an appraisal. Again, they may charge you outside of escrow or they may charge you inside of escrow. If you negotiate the price outside of escrow, you may get a better deal because they know they're getting their money up front. It's kind of the same thing. They don't know if you're going to buy the house or not based on the appraisal. So, but a lot of them will put it into escrow. That's more common that they will put it in there. Somebody will pay them for that appraisal, but that appraisal fee that's important. You're not going to get a loan without an appraisal fee unless you're putting a ton of money down. And even then, they probably still want an appraisal, your lender. Oh, points, lender points. Yeah, when you're getting a loan, if you're trying to bump down that interest rate as much as possible, you're probably going to be paying some points. And when you do, well, you got to pay for them somewhere, and that's usually done in escrow. Matter of fact, it's not too often that I know of that is paid outside of escrow. Pretty much every time I know about points being paid, it's in escrow because you don't pay the lender until you actually get the loan. So that's going to be, points is 1% of your loan. So if I'm getting a loan for $500,000, I'm paying $5,000 for a point. That's 1%. That's a lot. But you may get a bump down in interest rate. Maybe you'll go from say 3% to 2.75, or 3% to 2.5%, whatever. it's up to whatever the lender has as far as their points, why they're charging the points. They give a certain deduction in interest for every dollar that you give them, essentially. In prepaid interest is what it is. Points of prepaid interest. Title insurance. Title insurance is used to ensure that title is in your name and that all people behind you have a consistent chain of who's owned that property and that there's no dispute over who owns that property. So title insurance is worthwhile because if you buy a property without title insurance and somebody pulls up a claim and says, "Hey, we own this property," well, you're going to have to deal with that. So title insurance allows for them to deal with that. Somebody says, "Hey, no, I was an heir to this guy who owned the property before, and I should have gotten I had a 50% ownership, and this guy sold it as if he had a full ownership, and so I'm still entitled to my ownership of the property." You don't want to deal with that. Title insurance will cover that. A lot of times, I have been gifted title insurance from the seller, and I've been gifted title insurance from the realtor when the seller wasn't willing to pay for it. So there are ways to get rid of that. It's a couple $100, and if you can't get somebody else to pay for it, you get to. Origination fee. Your lender may charge an origination fee. It's just a fee for starting up the loan. Oh, prepaid interest. Prepaid interest is another way that you're paying your lender. See, when you are buying your house and you're closing escrow, you're getting a certain amount of time where you're not making any principal payment. I mean, you're making a down payment, so that's going to be your largest principal payment in a long time, right? So the lender says, all right, if you're closing on the first of the month, we need 31 days or 30 days worth of interest, or 28 days, as it were. So we need a full month's worth of interest. Now, if you close on the 31st of the month, then they say, oh, we only need 1 day's worth of interest. And so that may be a couple of bucks or maybe $100. It depends on how big your loan is. So they'll just take the full year's interest, divide it into daily interest based on a 360 calendar year. I know 360 days, it's a financial calendar year. And they'll do that. That will be your daily rate. And then they'll multiply that by how many days you have before you end the month. So if you're on the 31st of the month, it's only 1 day. So it's not very much interest. But no principal goes toward that. It's just your down payment going toward it. But that's how it's free money for the lender is what it is. But it allows them to lock in your loan and give you that loan, and then you don't have to make a payment on day one when you're walking into the house because it's prepaid until the first of the next month, usually. And it depends on what your lender decides to do as far as when your payments are due, but most often payments are due the first. So they will usually prorate back from where you're closing until the first of the following month. And that's also why a lot of times you don't have to make a payment the first of the month when you first pop in. It's free money to the lender. The next thing you might want to get is a pest inspection, meaning termite inspection or spider inspection or something. You want to have somebody go in there and take a look for termites. Well, there's a fee for that. It's usually done with a home inspection because, well, while they're there, they might as well look for termites and other bugs, ants, roaches, anything else that might be in the house. Because if you don't look for those things and you buy the house, you may be buying an infestation. You don't want that. So pay the fee. A lot of times the fee can be covered by the seller. It may also be covered by your realtor or the seller's realtor, depending on what the situation is. But you can negotiate that, and you definitely want to make sure there are no pests in your home, unless you're just into that kind of thing. It's weird. Give it up. A rate lock fee. What is a rate lock? A rate lock is when your lender locks in your rate. So for instance, you want to get that rate at 2.5%. Well, you may want it, but that rate changes all the time. The cost to get that rate changes all the time. So what a lender does is they say, okay, you can lock in this rate for this much money. You can lock it in for 15 days for this much money. You can lock it in for 30 days for this much money. You can lock it in for 60 days for this much money. The longer you lock your rate in, where you were guaranteed that rate, the more money you're going to pay. And you do have to lock in your rate. That is something that you'll end up having to do. Now, some lenders will cover that cost. They'll just eat it because they know they're going to get a big premium whenever you close escrow. Some lenders who are charging you every little thing so that they don't have to get charged and you're not paying them as much on the back end, that's why. Because you're paying for the rate lock up front, you're paying for all the little fees up front. You're going to pay for it one way or another. But that is another fee that you may end up having in escrow. All right, real estate commissions. If you're selling a home, typically the normal commission is 3% for the buyer's agent, 3% for the seller's agent. Now, that's not always the case. They are negotiable. Real estate commissions are negotiable. There was a big to-do about collusion amongst real estate agents because they all charge the same thing, but the reality is they don't. And if you go into selling a house, I know I'm talking about buying a house, but you go into selling a house and you don't negotiate with their realtor, you're going to be paying the 6%. You may even pay more than that, depending on what areas you're in. Sometimes they charge more than that if you're in a lower price area because their time is worth something. So for you as a buyer, you may be charged 3% for the commission for your real estate agent, and that would be paid through closing. It's possible. I haven't ever paid my buyer agent. I've only paid my seller's agents and the buyer's agent for when I was selling. But as a buyer, I've never paid a real estate agent. Usually that's negotiated in the contract for the seller to pay. So if you find yourself being pushed into paying your buyer's agent, you probably need to rearrange your contract, or maybe you got a good deal where you knocked down the price a couple $1,000 in exchange for you paying the agent, and you maybe have a friend or a family member who's the agent, so you don't have to pay them anything or very little. So it is possible that you could pay that in escrow as a buyer. All right, so there are escrow fees and there are recording fees, and they are two different things. They can be. So here you got another fee, a recording fee. The recording fee is not to pay your escrow officer, the person who's closing escrow for you. It's to pay the fees to the county to record your name on title. And that's different than title insurance. That's different than property tax. It literally is the cost of the county clerk taking your information and locking it into the system, which is almost instantaneous, but they charge money for it. So it could be like $35 or $40. It's a recording fee. Everyone has to pay it. Everyone has to pay it. Otherwise, you wouldn't get your name on the property. Usually, you can get the seller to pay those if you're getting them to pay closing costs. Your seller can usually cover that cost, but you may end up having to pay it yourself. A survey fee. Now, not all properties will get a survey fee. However, there are some cases where, in certain jurisdictions, where they require a survey fee, where they will go out and make sure that they're measuring that property right and saying, this is your property. If you have land that you're buying and you're not exactly sure where the borders are, you may have to get the land surveyed to verify that you have everything in place to say this is your property, to stake the claim. So you may have a survey fee. Now that's not going to happen on most people buying a property in the middle of a city or something, but it is possible that you could pay a survey fee. A transfer tax. Are you kidding me? We're already taxed on so many other things. But it's another fee. Some communities, some cities, some counties, some states, they require some kind of tax. So when you're transferring property from a seller to a buyer, you get to pay not only your property tax for being able to own that property, you also get to pay to be able to have that property put in your name, alongside with a recording fee that puts it in your name. So, sorry guys, taxes. Underwriting fees. So the underwriting fee is the fee that you pay for the lender's underwriter. Now, what does the lender underwriter do? They do a lot of research, guys. They'll verify that your credit is good, that it is what you say it is. They'll verify that you've been working as long as you say you have, that you've been making as much money as you say you have, that your money belongs to you. It's not drug money or something else. It's not money that was just given to you, that your money is seasoned. All right. They do a lot of research to make sure that lender is protected. Well, who's going to pay for them? You are. They're the one person that can either make or break a deal most of the time. But that underwriter is important, so there's a fee for all that time. And a VA funding fee. If you're going for a VA loan, well, there's a funding fee for that. Whew, guys, that's a lot of fees. I went through every single one that I could think of. If you know of a closing cost that you've had to pay that I didn't mention, put it down below. I'd love to see it. Those are the main ones that I've seen that people have to pay, and it's a lot of fees. Now, if you're fortunate, you don't have to pay very many of them. And I would say part of your negotiation is trying to cut down on those fees. They're trying to get the seller to put some money in the pot so that they can pay for those fees. I've kind of given you some ideas on how to lower those closing costs as I've gone through each closing cost, but the biggest thing is just asking for the seller to pay closing costs. I will tell you, in a buyer's market, you can get sellers to pay the closing costs. However, in a seller's market, which is basically the market we've been in for the last year or two, they don't have to pay those closing costs. I can tell you though, because a lot of sellers are novices and haven't sold houses before, this may be their first house that they're selling. They may pay the closing costs because they don't know any better, or they may feel that that's the only way they'll be able to sell their house. Always ask. Always ask for the closing costs to be paid by the seller, all closing costs, and then work your way back. If they say no, or if you're in a hot market where there are 20 or 30 people showing up to this property, like the house that I recently bought, that's how you know you're in a good neighborhood. When you got 20 or 30 people showing up at the house saying, I want to buy this house, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to pay closing costs, because that's the competition. The less the seller has to give up when they sell the house, the more likely they are to choose you as the person who's going to buy their house. And that just makes sense. Another way that you can cut down on your closing costs, for instance, with my last purchase, I had the lender toss in money toward closing costs. The lender said, you know what? Instead of me paying fees and points up front, I said, you know what? Go ahead and raise my rate a little bit. So I got 3 1/8, I believe it was, 3 1/8%. I said, raise my rate, and they offered me a couple $1,000s toward closing costs. I'm going to refinance in a couple of months, and when I do, I'm going to do a no-cost refinance. And so I'm going to pay maybe $500 for that couple $1,000s that they gave me. That's a good way to get somebody else to pay your closing costs. If you don't have all the money you think you might need to have for escrow, sometimes your lender will allow you to roll those escrow fees into your loan. If you do that, it's less money that you need up front, but you will pay for that dearly in the end, because you're paying interest now on all of those closing costs. And if you're talking maybe $5,000-7,000 in closing costs over 30 years, you're paying another $10,000, in interest. You're doubling whatever it is that you're borrowing. You're doubling it in interest. So if you can pay for it up front, the most that you can pay up front, the better off you'll be. And then another suggestion is, sometimes, especially if you know the agent, or if you know the agent's getting a lot of money because you're in a high-priced market, you can always ask your agent to cover some of those fees. And most of the time, your agent is willing to do that. If you're a buyer, this is the first time you're buying a home, and you think you're going to have to pay some of those fees, when you're searching out your buyer agent, ask them, hey, would you be willing to pay some of my closing costs if I go in on a property? Like, will you pay for my title insurance? Will you pay for my homeowner's insurance? Will you pay for an inspection fee? Will you pay for an appraisal fee? Ask your agent if they'd be willing to do that, because the reality is they're going to get a good chunk out of this property. Let's say it's $1 million property. Well, that 3% they don't get to keep all 3%. Let's not be crazy. They're going to get, so they're not going to get 30 grand when you buy that $1 million property. That $30,000 actually is cut in half, because those agents share half of that money with their broker. And so your buyer agent maybe get 15,000. That's a considerable sum for the amount of work they're going to do for you. And I can tell you, $15,000, in my opinion, they probably aren't going to do that much work for it. They will do a lot of work, but I don't think $15,000 worth of work. I've worked with a lot of realtors. They know that. They don't know that you know that. So reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? Can you pay some of my closing costs? And this is going to cheese off some real estate agents probably. Can you pay some of my closing costs? And most often, with the agents that I've used, they said, yeah, I can pitch in a little bit. And they do. Especially if you're doing most of the work. If you found the property and you already know how to fill out all the paperwork, you already know how to do most of the work, then you can submit it. So, guys, I really hope that I've helped you out today. Again, if you know of a closing cost that I did not cover, put it in the comments down below, please. I'd love to learn, and other people that read the comments would like to learn from you. And if you have a question about what I've talked about today, please ask it down below, or reach out to me on my website at www.watchbobonyoutube.com. And you can reach out to me there, and I can answer your question one-on-one. Thank you for watching. There's that subscribe button. If you want to push it, please do. There's a like button. If you push that, I appreciate it. There's a dislike button. Just hit it twice, and you're gold. All right, guys. Until next time.